Joining me now is Raymond Ibrahim. He is someone that I've been reading for a long time. And I want to thank Hadia for getting him on the broadcast with us tonight. Raymond, welcome to the broadcast. Thanks for being here.
Hi, Brandon. Great to be with you.
Great to have you on. We have been talking, I've been reading your stuff for so long and wanting to talk to you for so long. So we're so happy you're here. Thank you for that. All right.
My pleasure.
Let's talk, if we can, about, and I'm going to promote your website. Let's go ahead and do that now, by the way. There it is, Raymond Ibrahim, see how it's spelled, folks, .com. It's that easy, okay? And we have some of his books. I'll even just show you some of his books real quick. Here you go. Two Swords of Christ, The Defenders of the West, so many others, right? Check them all out. The Al-Qaeda Reader. In fact, let's start with that. Let's start with that right there. Tell me about Al-Qaeda, will you? Because I know we went into Afghanistan supposedly to eradicate Al-Qaeda, but everything I'm listening and learning, Al-Qaeda seems to be stronger now more than ever. I'm also hearing from some former intelligence people that the bin Laden sons are very busy planning terrorist attacks on America, that Al-Qaeda has a very detailed plan to kill a lot of Americans, much bigger than 9/11. Multiple guys in a squad hitting multiple places, multiple soft targets in one day, and it will last for several days. Now, you go on our website, worldviewtube.com, and I know my audience is hearing me repeat this, but I want Raymond to hear it because he doesn't know. It's my first time interviewing him. But going back to 2008, we were warning about a terrorist attack in America, like what happened in Beslan with the killing of over 300, most of them children, in the former Soviet Union. And we've been warning since 2008 about soft targets like schools, and it was called the perfect day, was what the scenario was called. And now I'm hearing from some former intelligence people that are openly talking about it on X, that they're concerned about the bin Laden boys and Al-Qaeda, and that they have terror cells here in the U.S., that they're here and they have a plan. And it's going to be basically like an October 7th attack here in the United States, which again, on October 7th, we heard Hamas saying, we're going to do this again and again and take it to the U.S. What are your thoughts on that? How does that fit with your book on your own website on the Al-Qaeda Reader?
Yeah, actually, it fits in very well. That book, which is actually my first book, so it's good that we start there, which I started writing in 2005, about 20 years ago, and it came out in 2007, was basically based on the writings of Al-Qaeda, primarily Osama bin Laden, and also Ayman Zawahiri, his number two, but who eventually became number one until he also got killed. And it was their theological worldview. And up until that point, we had only been exposed to their propaganda, which the Western media was only too happy to disseminate, which was basically, we're attacking you, we're killing you because we have grievances. You started it. And the list went from the Crusades to colonialism to Israel to, teddy bears named Muhammad. I mean, it went on and on. But you found out in the theological tracts, and this kind of gets to why Al-Qaeda is still alive, their arguments that they presented, their theological doctrinal arguments against the infidel, were such that they really transcend Al-Qaeda. In other words, they're the same arguments that ISIS uses, the same arguments that Hamas uses, Boko Haram in Nigeria, Al-Shabaab, and all of these things. So the point is, you come to learn that the hate-filled jihadist teachings are not articulated by Al-Qaeda. They are not the authors of it, which is why you can kill Osama bin Laden, you can kill Ayman Zawahiri, you can kill this or that leader. The idea doesn't go away. The organizations morph and shift into each other, and one grows out of another one, but they all have the same underlying worldview, which of course goes back centuries to the founding of Islam itself and the teachings of the Prophet of Islam, Muhammad. So I think that's if you want to understand what you were mentioning, the threat to the U.S. and to anyone in general, that's really it. It's these teachings are not byproducts of Al-Qaeda. This is how they've often been presented in the Western media, unfortunately, that I remember when Osama bin Laden died, all these, leading CNN analysts said the war on terror is over. We got the bad guy. Yeah, well, the ideas transcend the bad guy because they're integral to the religion and the jihadist worldview.
So would you be shocked, Raymond, that we see one day a October 7th style attack here in the U.S. where we have churches, mosques, hospitals, schools, theaters, restaurants hit soft targets? Would you be shocked if that kind of thing is in play, as some retired national security people are saying?
No, not at all. ISIS, the Islamic State, which is the most forthright of these terrorist organizations, has called specifically and precisely for that. And the small scale attacks that are not as big as what you're describing, but that happen all the time, especially in Europe, is when some Muslim just gets up and crashes his truck or car into a crowd or whatever, just like happened at the synagogue in Manchester a couple of weeks ago, and comes out and stabs people. That happens with alarming frequency, and it's often in direct response to these ISIS communiques that people in the West never hear about, where they tell them specifically, go out as the arm of the Islamic State, terrorize the infidels. They quote key Quranic verses like Quran 9:5, which says, slay the infidels, the idolaters, wherever you find them. Okay. And long story short, no, of course I would not be surprised. And of course we've had bigger attacks. We've had, the 9/11 itself. So what you're describing, that's actually a smaller scale than what we've already had and what we are currently having all around, because you have all these so-called lone wolf terrorists, and they can accomplish a lot, especially if they work together. And they're out there and they're radicalized, as the saying goes, by ISIS and by Islamic scriptures of the jihadist nature anyway. And so really, their imagination is the limit, how to terrorize and kill infidels. And if they can come up with that kind of means, these terrorist types, why not? They will.
Mm. What can you tell me about, I'm going to hopefully say his name right, Noor Wali Masood, I guess also known as Mufti Noor Wali Masood. I guess he's the current emir or leader of the Tehrik-i-Taliban Pakistan, known as TTP. Are you familiar with this guy? Because I hear he is heavily involved in what's being planned for the U.S.
No, sorry, I can't comment. I've kind of been out of the circle these days of contemporary developments. But if you let me know a little about him, I can try to piece it together.
Well, I guess he was born in Pakistan in '79. I guess right now we have a bounty on him for $5 million for information leading to his arrest. And he continues to fragment internally, but leverages Afghanistan Taliban support for his operations. But I've been reading more and more that he's also one of the guys that we should be very concerned about from a national security standpoint. How many of these folks that are these imams and leaders of Islam are responding to our invasion of Afghanistan? In other words, did the war on terror make it worse? Did the so-called war on terror just create more terrorists? And in one sense, by just killing so many over there, invading them over there, because I'm also hearing they want to come here and kill in communities where there are a lot of retired veterans and make those retired veterans, feel the way they felt when we invaded their country. Do you think the war on terror actually is backfired?
Yeah, the war on terror, I'm old enough because it's been going on, since 2001. So
Right.
I've been following it since the start. And I honestly don't know what are the good benefits that have come out of it. Okay. All I've seen is things get worse wherever the U.S. goes. And to be honest with you, almost every single U.S. president, up until even Donald Trump, is one way or another oftentimes involved in being supportive of these terrorist groups who are presented as, freedom fighters. So, you're speaking of Al-Qaeda, the guy, Ahmed al-Sharaa, I believe, who's the new president of Syria.
Right.
Well, he's Al-Qaeda. And, Donald Trump met him and shook hands with him and said he's a tough guy and he's going to hopefully, bring us a new start. So the bottom line is, wherever these terrorist groups arise, and then you have the violence, and then somehow or other, the United States gets involved, and it all just gets worse. But more specifically, and you saw this, ISIS. Well, ISIS was originally freedom fighters in Iraq and Syria, and then they became what they became. So I think that's the big price of trying to sort of ally with, for whatever purposes, these groups. But more specifically, when people talk about the war on terror, I think you're referring to Afghanistan. That was, of course, the specific. And what's the end of that? I just know that we pulled out rather ignominiously under Joe Biden. And what's changed? I mean, what is Afghanistan now a democracy and no longer a patriarchy? No, I mean, it's identical to how it was before. The same feelings of those people, which would be considered a very conservative Islam, and the same, disdain for the West. It's all the same after all that blood and treasure. So the long and short of it is, I have a very dim view of sort of Western interference in these countries. Not that they shouldn't interfere, but just the way it's been done so far has definitely been not very productive and, in fact, counterproductive.
Let me play a clip for you. I know I've played it several times for my audience. It's only 1 minute and 13 seconds long, but I want you to see it because I want to ask you what happened to the President Trump of his first term to the President Trump you just referenced, who's calling the president of Syria a good-looking guy, a handsome guy, strong guy, calling the president of Turkey in the Oval Office last week a good man, a strong man. I'm like, what happened to this Donald Trump when he was running for president the first time and in his first term? Take a listen.
There's a Muslim problem in the world.
But you do believe overall there is a Muslim problem in the world?
Well, there is a Muslim problem, absolutely. You just have to turn on your television set. I think Islam hates us.
Did you mean all 1.6 billion Muslims?
I mean a lot of them. You look at what's happening with the Quran, it's a pretty scary thing. There's something there that teaches some very negative vibe. They do not respect us at all. Large portions of a group of people, Islam, large portions want to use very, very harsh means. You have more than a handful of moderate Muslims, but you certainly have a problem with Muslims. If you have people coming out of mosques with hatred and with death in their eyes and on their minds, we're going to have to do something. They're trying to take over our children and convince them how wonderful ISIS is and how wonderful Islam is, and we don't know what's happening. And we have to look at the Muslims and we have to do something. We cannot stand by and be the stupid people while our country is destroyed. I want surveillance of certain mosques, okay?
Ibrahim, what do you think happened to that Donald Trump? Because I agree with so much of that. I'm sure you do as well, right?
Yeah, that's the old refreshing Donald Trump who made so many people love him and vote for him. And
right.
And that's not the Donald Trump of today, obviously. Something changed. It's funny because I remember he also, another thing you could have added to that collage is he used to say that Barack Obama was the founder of ISIS. And he had a legitimate point because, of course, ISIS arose under Obama and Hillary Clinton's Secretary of State's tenure. And, so there was obviously some, and it's even worse than that when you really get into it. But, what is he now with Syria? The way he's treating this Ahmed al-Shara of Syria. So it's just this unwavering thing, goes back to Reagan and the Mujahideen who became Al-Qaeda. That's just unfortunate, and why he has changed the way, he really, everything he said, as politically incorrect as it was in that clip you just played, was fair and accurate. And I think a lot of Americans agreed with that. But for him now to, just change like that, I don't know.
Well, and then on top of that, he's added some very troubling people to his advisory board. Here's one from even the Economic Times. Ex-jihadist with Al-Qaeda, Lashkar-e-Talib links joins Trump's religious freedom advisory board. Two former U.S. jihadists who trained in these terror camps in Pakistan have been appointed to the White House advisory board of lay leaders under Donald Trump. Ismail Royer, convicted for supporting terror activists, including attacks in Kashmir. And the other one is Sheikh Hamza Youssef, co-founder of the U.S. Muslim College, faces criticism for alleged extremist links. I mean, why are these people on his, really, seriously? Religious freedom? Do you think these guys are really for religious freedom, Raymond?
No, I don't. I don't know. Again, very troubling development on the Trump administration's part, why something like that would even be happening. To me, I don't want to enter into the realm of conspiracy theories, but it's pretty inexplicable at this point.
Do you think it's one of the issues of follow the money? If you have Trump golf course and resort being built in Qatar, and you've got his son-in-law, wasn't his son-in-law bailed out with his building on 666 Fifth Avenue, New York, with his by the Qataris? Don't you have Steve Witkoff? Wasn't he somehow involved financially with Qatar? You got the Arab states involved in financial dealings. I mean, at what point is it follow the money?
Yeah, I mean, money definitely buys a lot of goodwill. So that could very well explain this sudden shift. I'm actually surprised about those 2 recruits that you just pointed out. I wasn't even aware of that. But that again is just it's just funny because Trump is somehow, the guy who was going to drain the swamp is, in a way starting to act the way the swamp has always acted.
Mm-hmm. And I don't like doing shows like this because I've been a big supporter of him. And
yeah, me too.
That's my job. My job is to present the truth. I'm not a shill for anybody. So it disappoints me to have to do this. I don't want to do this. I'd love to report next week that he's kicked these people off the board and had a change of heart on all of this and gone back to being the Donald Trump of the clips we played. Let's talk about America. We have the growth of Islam. It's growing so fast. And we hear President Trump holding meetings in the White House, which I appreciate, on Antifa and the Marxist and what they're doing and disrupting their funding, and talking about studying the financials to find out who's funding these anarchist and Marxist revolutionaries. I say thank you, President Trump. I agree 100%. That's one reason why so many people voted for you, because we thought you would do that, and you're doing that. That's what we're being told. But what about the other side of the red-green axis, the green, the Islamist side? Why are we not, if we're going to label Antifa a domestic terrorist organization, why not Muslim Brotherhood? Why not go after all of the money they're bringing into the U.S. and all of these mosques they're funding? Like my friend Dave Gobbets, who I interview regularly, who's gone undercover in 425 mosques in America. Most of these are funded by countries that do not wish us well. Why is he so focused on the Marxist side, but not the Islamist side? I guess it goes back to maybe the issue of money. I don't know. But what about the longevity for our country? We can't see these groups growing and expanding the way they are. They've taken down pretty much Michigan. They've taken down Minnesota. They're targeting Texas. They're now targeting my home state of Tennessee. How much time do we have left? And if President Trump's not going to do it, do we really think another administration will?
Yeah, well, to your first point about, this cozying up again to these organizations, if you really want to look at the ultimate example, of course, is, Donald Trump and all American presidents' very close ties with Saudi Arabia. Mm-hmm. And I say that because Saudi Arabia is the home of radicalization. Okay, objectively speaking, they are the ones who fund, disseminate, print all the radical literature that ends up in all these Western mosques. They're the ones they call them Wahhabis, which means they're Salafists, which means they're literalists. Okay, I remember I translated some years back that, to show the point that after some Western diplomat, I think it was Tony Blair or something, went and danced with the Saudis and holding swords. And then there's a little fatwa on a government-funded website, a connected website of Saudi Arabia, teaching a standard Islamic doctrine about how you have to hate non-Muslims with all your heart, even if they're good to you, even if they want to help you. This is the doctrine of al-wala wal-bara, and it comes from the Quran. And it just goes on and on and on. So this is the government, on the one hand, saying this, telling their citizens this. And then on the other hand, our leaders and theirs meet and exchange money and favors and whatever. And it's just ridiculous, because this is, like I said, to me, the head of the snake, the financial head. You have to have a financial source for radicalization, and it is Saudi Arabia. They're just filthy rich because of oil. Okay, and they are the ones. If you go to Pakistan, if you go to Somalia, the literature there is often 9 times out of 10 coming from Saudi Arabia. Okay, the radical literature. So that's just one example. As far as what's happening in the United States, Muslims, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, the thing is, though, you have to look at the law. I mean, if the law allows this, Islam is treated like a regular religion, and we have freedom of religion. You can't discriminate. Okay, so as long as it has that protection, I think that one can complain about Muslim growth in the U.S., but legally speaking, I don't think much can be done unless something is done to the definition of religion itself and how Islam does or does not fit into that category.
Let's talk about the number of Christians that are being murdered by Islamists. We've got Nigeria. Here's an October 5th article. Christians are being wiped out in Nigeria as millions face death. There's very little talk about this on the media here in America. I don't see any college students protesting or holding parades and protests or sit-ins for these Christians.
Yeah, for some reason, these Black lives don't matter.
Wow.
And I think it's because they're Christian and they don't fit the narrative. They don't, it's a double whammy because it makes Muslims look bad and it makes Christians look good. And the media is never going to support that narrative. Okay. Both of it is bad for them. But yeah, it's definitely, this has been going on. I think the most recent estimate, I don't know, maybe 70 to 80,000 Christian Nigerians have been killed for their faith. And I think the number, going back maybe 10, 12, 15 years. And I think the number, the well-documented number is what a Christian is killed every 2 hours on average. Okay, so 12 every single day. You'd think this would be a story, okay, but it's not, obviously, because the media is agenda-driven. And like I said, this doesn't meet their agenda. And Nigeria is really the tip of the iceberg. It's a very graphic, carnage-filled tip. But if you go into the Islamic world in general, you're going to see in Africa, it's the same all over, in Mozambique and in Democratic Republic of Congo and all around sub-Saharan Africa, Christians are being massacred, okay, literally genocide, and you're not hearing about it. But even in other Islamic countries that are supposedly moderate, even Indonesia, supposedly the most moderate Islamic country, you will find Christians are being persecuted. There's a lot of pressure on their places of worship. Churches are being banned or not allowed to, be registered. And again, going back to give you an example about Saudi Arabia, our good friend and ally, you can't even have a single church there. Okay. Right. And when they find Christians huddled and celebrating Christmas, they arrest them. Okay. So, I mean, think about it. That is our friend and ally. What do you expect is going to happen?
Let's take a look at this article written by you. England's St. George flag, forged in history's crusades, reborn in today's jihads. September 10th, 2025. We see people being arrested for flying this flag in the UK. Tell me the history of this flag, what it means, and why is it being flown by so many today, particularly in the face of Islam taking over the UK?
Yeah, that's the irony of it. A lot of English folk are rallying to it because it's their flag. It's their oldest national flag, and it has a cross on white. But what most people don't know, including some English, is that it actually goes way back, and it was forged in the same context of what's happening today. It was actually a crusader flag, and red meant martyrdom. I'm going to fight and defend the Christian faith and die. And white meant I'm trying to live a pure Christian life. And it really starts with the Knights of the Temple. But it actually, so what was it for? It was developed to fight Muslims there, okay, in the Holy Land. But then today, people don't realize that the same very flag, people are rallying to it in the context of being fed up with Muslims being here in the UK, doing the same things that they did historically there to Christians and, to non-Muslims in general. So I always thought the irony, it just shows you the unwavering continuity of this sort of conflict between Muslims and non-Muslims, or Christians and Westerners in this context.
And so the folks that are waving it, I'm sure, are very aware of the Crusades and what it represents. So apparently the politicians know as well, and they don't want their Islamic benefactors in the UK offended by this specific flag they're picking up. I mean, they could pick up the Union Jack, right? But they're choosing this flag to fly. I mean, there's a reason why. You just explained it. So isn't that something that the folks in Great Britain are putting it down? They're persecuting their own people. It has to be because these politicians are either afraid of Islam or they're being paid. Their NGOs, their campaigns, their re-election, they're being paid. I mean, why else would you betray your own people and homeland?
Oh, exactly. And as I always say, when you want to answer these questions definitively, ask yourself if the shoe is on the other foot. Or in other words, who else does this but Europeans and Westerners? Can you imagine a single country, whether Japan or India or China or any African country or Latin American country, convicting and getting angry at its citizens for being patriotic and waving that nation's flag. That doesn't happen. It only happens in the West. Okay, and that itself really speaks volumes to me about the nature of what's really going on here and how it's really a sort of internal subversion from especially the politicians, because really the buck stops with them.
The rise of anti-Semitism. I don't have to agree, and I don't agree with everything the government of Israel does. Even more, I agree with everything my government does. But I understand, particularly as a Christian, what I see as God's plan for the Jewish people and what God has done with the Jewish people, even helping, I believe, to give us the Bible inspired. But I think God has a plan for many, many of the Jewish people as I study the Bible. But I preference that because I'm not saying the defense of the Israeli government. I'm talking about the Jewish people and fighting anti-Semitism and the horrors of the Holocaust and all that goes with that. It seems though Americans, and maybe people in the UK, don't know, were never taught about the relationship between Hitler and the Grand Mufti of Palestine, and that he recruited some 10,000 Muslims to wear the Nazi uniform. It seems we're setting ourselves up in the West here with Islam, which is so tied to a hatred of Christians and Jews, but yet all we hear about is the Jews, the Jews, the Jews. I have to wonder, at what point is this being funded by the Islamists, this anti-Semitism? At what point do I have to ask, is it China? Is it Russia? Is it other Iran that are also funding some of this in order to break us apart as a country? Or is it Islamic money that's doing this so that they can damage America and then go after some of the Jews worldwide as well as Israel? Because when you study this Holocaust, we know the Grand Mufti, according to the Nuremberg trials, was heavily involved as an architect of the final solution. And yet, there's so little talk about that. Makes me wonder how much these Islamic countries are involved in influencing our textbooks, our schools, our social media, to stir us up as a country and pit us against each other.
Well, yeah, I mean, again, this is very much connected to the question of money and influence from Islamic countries. In as much as they have that money and influence, you can expect whatever agenda that serves them, in this case, Jew hatred, for instance, to be promulgated and sort of disseminated. That wouldn't be surprising at all. But what I also find interesting and kind of alarming is, whatever, there seems to be this weird dichotomy, which is kind of like, for the longest time, it went like this: Israel is good, therefore Muslims are bad. Or the flip side is Muslims are bad, therefore Israel is good. Now, in as much as Israel is coming under a lot of criticism, I'm seeing the opposite, which is Israel is bad, therefore Muslims are good. And I think that's a very dangerous way of thinking because, as you pointed out, however one wants to think of Israel and its political actions, etc., I don't think that in any way, shape, or form should sort of rehabilitate the image of Islam in anyone's eyes. They're not mutually exclusive categories. It's not like if one's good, the other's bad, and if the other is good, the other is bad. So I would tell people that during this entire process with all this criticism against Israel, I'm seeing a lot of sympathy for Islam in general, and it's just not really warranted. I think people need to separate the two and see them, again, the Israel thing, that's not my field, okay? But Islam is, and I don't think anyone should give it a pass because they have any kind of, because they're critical of Israel per se.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
so that is definitely one kind of sort of result that I've seen that I find very interesting and somewhat alarming.
And of course you got Mahmoud Abbas, PLO. We see him, I think he was one of the guys standing there in Egypt at Cairo. And yet he wrote his doctoral thesis denying the Holocaust. So it's just a strange group of people you're trying to make peace with. And you're like, this is just not going to work. But supposedly we have now peace in the Middle East. That's what President Trump announced. And yet today he came out on social media and he said that if Hamas continues to kill people in Gaza, which was not the deal, we will have no choice but to go in and kill them. Thank you for your attention to this matter. What do you mean if they continue to kill? I thought we had peace in the Middle East. Just last week, he announced, or early this week, he was in Egypt, announced peace in the Middle East. Now he's got a tweet out today, Thursday, saying, if they keep killing, wait a minute, I thought we had peace.
Yeah, it reminds me of the Iran thing where like war and then we have peace. And then I started hearing, and now I'm going to hear again, and you're going to hear again, of course, more wars coming between Iran and Israel, et cetera. So yeah, that area is just way too volatile. It hasn't had peace in a century. And it's not something that can be easily, I don't think, ameliorated through normal means.
All right, in our closing time together, let's talk a little bit about your books. Here's one, Defenders of the West, the Christian heroes who stood against Islam. Tell me about maybe England's Richard Lionheart and some of these other folks. Tell me what they did and why it should inspire us today. And how does that influence you? And do you see any such figures today in America or in Great Britain?
Yeah, so the nature of the book was actually just to discuss the conflict. But the first book before that, Sword and Scimitar, looked at all these major decisive battles between Christendom or the West and Islam throughout history. And in this book, I basically decided to look at decisive men to show, especially Christians of the modern West, that you don't have to always be a doormat. These Christians that I identify and write about, who were crusaders or fought in crusades, or even they're not, when a lot of them are from Hungary and Romania. I even include Vlad Tepes, the Impaler, Dracula, because again, when you dig into the sources, you find he's not just a pure monster. He actually was a patriot who loved his religion and his country, and he just fought fire with fire. And the desperate means that he succumbed to is really more a reflection of what was required to fight the enemy, which were the Muslims, the Turks, in this case. But it's good. I think that book is really good because it shows, especially Christians who've sort of been taught that they have to be doormats, that no, there is a righteous militant side, and it's in the nature of just war. Okay, which isn't about aggression or forcing people to become Christian. It's about actually defending that which is right and good and noble, including one's own homeland and family and civilization and culture and religion, which too many people in the West don't seem to be keen on doing. So that was one of the main reasons I wanted to write that book, was just to show that it wasn't always like this, and there was a time. And that's the irony, that if you read that book, you'll find that Europeans fought tooth and nail to keep Islam out of Europe. For a reason. And now they're doing the opposite. The elected leaders, they're bringing Islam in by the millions. And lo and behold, what are Muslims doing in Europe? Well, the same sorts of things that these guys in this book were trying to fight and prevent from happening. So, definitely a sober lesson about what happens when people forget history, which is that they repeat it.
And here's another one you wrote. Crucified Again, exposing Islam's new war on Christians. For many, many years, people can go back into our vault and see that one of the phrases I've been using is that the globalists are using the Islamists as junkyard dogs to de-Christianize the West. They're using the Islamists as junkyard dogs to go after their enemies. And I think that's happening. And I think they're also using them to say, after the globalists stand back and watch, hey, we got a problem. We have the extremist Christians, the extremist on Islam, the extremist on the Jews side. These are all the problems. And we need to get people under control, and hate crime laws, and we need to limit free speech. And and then of course you have the problem with immigration. They flooded our country. They flooded Great Britain. And now we'll solve that immigration crisis. Everybody needs to have biometrics and be chipped and tagged like cattle. And then people can go to and fro, and we'll have safety and security. I think we're not done yet with major terrorist attacks that I think they'll let happen so that Americans will go where they otherwise would never agree to go, being willing to be tracked and tagged like cattle. Can't let a good crisis go to waste, right? Speak to that, how the globalists have used Islam as this battering ram to de-Christianize the West, but also to get people in the West to surrender to a dystopian, New World Order, if you want to call it that, or the Great Reset.
Yeah, well, definitely there's a lot of, plausibility to what you're describing. They're bringing in these millions of Muslims. And on the one hand, Europeans need to cater to them. They need to suppress your religion, suppress your culture, because you have to accommodate, the newcomer, who, of course, is inherently hostile to Christianity and European culture anyway, to start with, because they're Muslim. And, you're seeing violence, and you're seeing, as I described, when Muslims go on a stabbing spree, including killing little children, okay, which happens again with a lot of frequency. And all of this is, again, making a lot of the normal people in Europe very, very angry. And, rallying around the St. George flag is one thing. But I do think that, yeah, if they rise up, if they try to do anything, I'm speaking about the native Europeans, that will give the government the pretext, or the regimes, to actually crack down. And like you said, yeah, it's the radical Muslims who are causing problems, but it's usually they're going to use that as a pretext when those who are provoked and frustrated, namely Europeans in this case, do anything, then it gets multiple, then they're demonized, and all these laws to censor and take away their rights in the name of security will happen. And this goes all the way back. People often cite 9/11 to say, well, look at how much freedom and security rights we have to give up because of that as well. And that was well over 20 years ago. So now you have a whole continent that's just flooded with Muslims and a lot of frustrated and angry people. And then you have, the puppet masters above who are just waiting for it all to come to a boil. And then they step in and, declare peace at a price, of course, which is the revocation of your freedoms.
Indeed it is. I hope people will go here. Take a look, folks. RaymondIbrahim.com. Just spell his name out there. You see on the screen. You can find out about his books. You can get a signed copy of one of his books. Find all of his latest articles. Check it all. His YouTube. Check it all out there. RaymondIbrahim.com. I hope you'll come back, Raymond. I've been wanting to interview you for so long, and I'm so glad you're here, and I hope you'll come back.
Sure, I'd be happy to. Thanks, Brandon.
Look forward to it. Thank you. Raymond Ibrahim checking in tonight, folks. Go to his website, RaymondIbrahim.com. All right? We'll be right back after this short break. Hello, I'm Brandon House. I want to thank you for all your support at wvwfoundation.com that helps make possible pushing out 24/7 content for free. Without your support, we'd have to put it all behind a paywall. But thanks to you and your support through our foundation, we're able to push it out for free as a broadcast service and broadcast ministry of WVW Foundation. Please consider going there and setting up an automatic monthly contribution, or go there and make an occasional contribution. If you prefer to support us through the mail, you'll find our mailing address there at wvwfoundation.com. You can also call and make your contribution over the phone by calling 901-825-0652. That's 901-825-0652. Again, all these details are available at wvwfoundation.com. Thank you for your support as we try to help people around the world understand the times through the lens of a Christian worldview.